Welcome everyone to the online training, Module 4, Lesson 3. Lesson 3 focuses on quasi-experimental techniques or designs. And this lesson will cover the following subtopics. First, we will look at a recall of discussion that we had in Module 3 on quasi-experimental designs. Then we'll move on to quasi-experimental designs or techniques. And finally, we'll also look at when it is appropriate to use quasi-experimental designs or techniques. Now, if we remember the discussion that we had in Module 3, we said that quasi-experimental research designs are similar to experimental designs in the sense that they also test causal hypothesis. They want to establish cause-effect elements of a program or policy. So in both experimental and quasi-experimental designs, the program is viewed as an intervention in which a treatment, which is either a program or a policy containing the elements that are being evaluated, is tested for how well it achieves its objectives as measured by a pre-specified set of indicators. A quasi-experimental design, by definition, lacks random assignment, while experimental designs involve random placement or assignment of elements to the treatment group and the control group. Such random assignment is not there in quasi-experimental designs. So assignment to conditions, that is treatment versus no treatment or comparison group, is by means of self-selection, or by which participants choose treatment for themselves, or administrator selection, where officials or teachers or policymakers and whoever is involved can facilitate the assignment of elements to the treatment and the control group, or either of the two, self-selection by participants or officials involved can facilitate assignment of elements to the groups. Now let's look at quasi-experimental designs. Quasi-experimental designs identify a comparison group that is as similar as possible to the treatment group in terms of some baseline characteristics. So evaluators will have a number of baseline characteristics that can be used for this purpose. So the comparison group captures what would have been the outcomes if the program had not been implemented. This is also referred to as the counterfactual. What should have been the condition? What should have been the state of affairs? What should have been the outcome in the absence of the program, or had the program not been implemented? then the difference in outcomes between the treatment group and the comparison group can be attributed to the program. So that's very important in quasi-experimental design on how to capture the impact of the program or the policy intervention. Although these methods have many attributes associated with scientific experiments, let's remember that they lack the benefits of random assignment of treatments across population that is often necessary for broad generalizability. Yet, we can also appreciate that purposive sampling also has its benefits, especially when assessing small subgroups that random sampling can miss. So despite limitations in terms of generalization of the findings from such quasi-experimental designs, we still appreciate the relevance or the benefits that can be derived from purposive sampling, from quasi-experimental designs or assignments. Researchers use these methods, quasi-experimental methods, typically to conduct tests in one of the two ways. One, over time, where you have the pre-intervention situation test and the post or the post-test situation, that is baseline situation, pre-test, and the post after the intervention situation test, which is also known as the double difference, before and after. Or it can be done over space, that is one-time comparison, that is one-time assessment, that is also known as the single difference. And usually this is done at the end of the program implementation. So you have a program being implemented for 5 years, and then the impact evaluation is done once after completing the implementation of the program. That is one-time comparison. By establishing near equivalence in factors that influence primary outcomes across treatment and control groups. Now, what techniques do we have for constructing comparison group or control group? There are a number of techniques that are used for this purpose or for constructing a valid comparison group. And examples include propensity score matching and regression discontinuity design. Now, these techniques are used because they help to reduce the risk of selection bias. Now, what is selection bias? It's the possibility that those eligible or choose to participate in the program intervention are systematically different from those who cannot or who do not participate. That is referred to as selection bias. Now, what quasi-experimental techniques do is to mimic random assignment. when is it appropriate to use quasi-experimental methods or designs or techniques? Quasi-experimental designs are most often used, one, when it is not possible to randomize individuals or groups to treatment and control group. That is for ex post impact evaluation designs, for example. Or they are also used for ex-ante impact evaluations. For example, where ethical or political or logistical challenges, constraints, like the need for a phased geographical rollout, rule out or do not permit randomization. So in such circumstances, quasi-experimental designs can be used. Quasi-experimental methods can also be used retrospectively. That is, after the intervention has taken place. For instance, at time t+1, as we'll see in the next table, in the next slide. In some cases, especially for interventions that are spread over longer duration, preliminary impact estimates may be made at midterm, that is at time t. So if we have a program maybe of 4 years or 5 years, instead of having one impact evaluation at the end of the 5 years or implementation in 5 years, midway, maybe after 2.5 years or 2 years, a midterm evaluation can be conducted. Lastly, baseline data should be collected before the intended recipients are exposed to the program or policy activities. That is at t-1. That is a time before program implementation starts. So the baseline data will establish the situation, the condition before the program activities start to be implemented. So in a summary form, when you look at the timing of intervention and data collection for impact evaluations, with a large sample, we can do this in 3 possible ways. Number 1, that is pre-intervention, before an intervention starts, that is at t-1 period, we conduct a baseline study that gives the data about the pre-intervention situation. Then it can also be done at stage 2, which is the intervention, or time t, which we saw earlier as midterm evaluation. That is halfway into the duration of the program implementation. We may assess to see what changes, what impacts, what outcomes are being achieved. The findings and lessons from the midterm evaluation can inform the implementation process in the next or second phase. And this is particularly done in those programs that are done in phases, say from phase A, B to C. So before moving from phase A to phase B, you may have an assessment, draw some lessons that can inform or bring some program improvement before you start implementing phase B. Similarly, before moving from phase B to phase C, you may also have to conduct an evaluation that can inform programming and implementation for phase C, and so on and so forth. The last phase is post-intervention evaluation, which is also known as end-line evaluation, that is done at T+1 period. Examples of quasi-experimental techniques that we'll look at in the next discussion or lesson include propensity score matching technique. Then we also have difference in difference, whether it is a single or double technique. And in many cases, in practice, the propensity score matching can be used along with the DID, that's the difference in difference technique, to get better estimates of program impact. Thank you for your attention.